The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of the station, its staff, management, or sponsors.
I have a guest tonight that has actually had the coronavirus or COVID-19. His name is Ryan, and you are the first person that I've interviewed so far that has had the disease. Now you look pretty healthy right now. So
yes.
Are you recovered or are you still ill?
Well, I feel overall like I'm close to 100%. I still feel some minimal symptoms. I still feel a little bit of a chest pressure, chest congestion, as well as a dry cough. But yeah, I mean, it's been a long 2 weeks. I mean, it's definitely been a long road to recovery.
So it
took
two full weeks for it to run its course?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, I'm on day, I believe, 16 now. My symptoms first appeared on the 23rd. And
what was your very first symptom?
My first symptom actually was a very abrupt onset of a fever. In fact, I was watching a movie around 1 a.m. and it hit me like a tidal wave. And the fever came in around 1:01. And so that was the first sign. I was worried, but I didn't think much of it. And then went to sleep, woke up next day.
A medical student, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Currently a third-year medical student.
Were you working with COVID-19 patients?
Well, I was not. We were not permitted. However, we were doing rotations through the hospital a couple days prior, and the reason I got it, one of my classmates actually tested positive when he flew back to Canada, and coincidentally enough, I saw him, hung out with him on the last day of class. So that's where I believe that I contracted the virus.
Okay, so how much contact do you think it took to get the disease?
It's a good question, because even my interactions with him, it was very casual. I don't recall him coughing or sneezing or anything like that.
He wasn't sick?
So he did not appear sick at all. I mean, even when he found out he was positive, it was news to him and it was a surprise to him. So and that's where I believe I got it. But again,
so let me ask you this. Was he like asymptomatic because it was early in his disease, or did he just have it and he didn't have any symptoms?
So it's hard to say, but overall he was asymptomatic. I talked to him and he said that his symptoms almost felt like it was a bad hangover that lasted for maybe 2 to 3 days. And because he's originally from Canada, when he flew back, he was required to get tested. So it doesn't seem like there's any rhyme or reason to, how you develop the course of these symptoms. So unfortunately, I kind of got the worse end compared to what he got.
I found you through social media because a lot of people were sharing your post that you did. And I'm in South Florida, and I think you're from South Florida, correct?
I am correct. Yeah, Coral Springs.
Okay, so I guess a lot of people that I know down here knew you, and that's how I saw your post. So that's why I wanted to contact you, because you were very descriptive in that, and you made it sound like it's no cakewalk to get this disease. I think you're very young and healthy. How old are you?
I'm 29 years old, with no prior significant past medical history. I think it's important now that I'm on the other side of things. I mean, keep in mind, I'm, young, healthy, and I never thought in a million years I would contract something like this. And, so I thought it was important to raise awareness, emphasize to people how very real this thing is, because it doesn't strike people until it hits close to home. And, being from South Florida, knowing so many people, I think it was important to spread that message.
Well, I think the important thing that you can do, Ryan, is young people are under the impression that they're not the ones that are going to suffer from this. And you did a lot of suffering, according to your post. Was it probably the most you've ever had?
Yeah, I've in my past, I've had the flu before, I've had mononucleosis before, but this is by far one of the longest clinical courses I've had to go through, with a virus like this, so it's definitely something not to be taken lightly. It was persistent, it was stubborn, and it's unsparing. And the biggest lesson I learned was that, it doesn't matter how old you are or how young you are, what type of history you have, you're invincible, and I was really reminded of that because I was one of those people that thought, man, I'm young, I'm healthy, I'll be good, until it actually hit me. So I just want to continue to raise with that awareness and spread that message and really drive that point home with people.
Okay, so I assume you think people should be doing everything they can not to contract this virus. I was just in the grocery store. I was wearing masks, gloves, goggles, everything. Half the people were doing that. The other 50% were just like normal. No mask, no glasses, no, touching everything. So some people are just doing nothing. Do you have any message for them?
So here's my message. I mean, also as someone with a medical background who's currently going through, school, I can appreciate both sides of the equation, right? So my biggest tip of advice for people, is don't let your guard down. It frustrates me and it saddens me to see that people are, going out in public and putting themselves in high risk situations and not taking the proper precautions. And you just, at this point in the game, you have to assume everything is infected, everything is contaminated, and that to me, you have to give yourself some peace of mind. And that includes wearing gloves, wearing a mask, and again, treating everything like it is contaminated.
So now I've heard that when you come down with these symptoms, you know that something is very, very wrong. Did you kind of know right when you got that fever that it's got to be COVID-19, or did you kind of brush it off at first and think maybe it's not?
When the fever first came on, I tried to brush it off. I wanted to convince myself it wasn't, but by the second day, I knew it was a viral in nature due to the fever, the temperature, the fatigue, the headache. And I also had received my flu shot about a month or two prior. So to me, that really raised the alarm bells. And then as the virus progressed, I knew without a doubt that at that point it had to have been COVID-19.
The onset was a bad fever, and I've heard the fever only comes at night. Is that right?
It was at night, 1 a.m. is when I received the fever, and progressively, and that's one of the bizarre things about the virus, is characteristically for me, it was the fatigue throughout the day, also very bad back pain, very bad muscle pain.
Back pain? I don't understand why back pain would be associated with this virus. You're a medical student. Explain it.
Well, it is bizarre, but you typically get muscle pain because your immune cells are fighting off this virus, and they release a lot of chemicals, a lot of toxins to help fight off this virus. And sometimes those toxins do collect in some of your muscles and cause some of that discomfort, some of that pain. Especially when you're in the midst of fighting and you're laying down, resting, and not really moving, not really detoxing these muscles, as they usually do through standard movement. But yeah, that was definitely something that was unique to me, was that muscle pain. I actually had to sleep on the floor to find comfort. Now I did that for about a week and a half.
Wow.
On the floor.
You mean flat your back on the floor?
Correct. Yeah.
That doesn't sound comfortable at all.
It wasn't, but
your back pain?
Correct. So ironically, it wasn't comfortable, but that's the only way I could, find the comfort, stretch my back out and stretch the muscle out in order to be able to sleep at night. Because, not only am I battling this fever, this nocturnal fever, the fatigue throughout the day, but the back pain would just keep me up at night if I tried to sleep in my bed or anywhere else. So the floor was the only place I could find any bit of comfort.
Wow. Now, you're saying the whole thing lasted about 10 full days or longer, right?
So, in total, I would say about 13 days. So that first week was just defined by fever, fatigue, headache, muscle pain, right?
Was it the kind of where you couldn't even get out of bed, you couldn't move around, or were you up and doing things around your home, or were you like totally wiped out?
I was definitely in bed most of the time. I tried not to get up if I didn't have to. And
that's what I've heard. Very, very, very tired, exhausted.
Yeah.
Okay.
It takes a lot out of you. And it wasn't until the second half of the virus where I actually developed some of the respiratory symptoms.
I was going to ask you weren't hospitalized at all, right?
I'm sorry?
You were not hospitalized during this?
I was not. Fortunately, I was not hospitalized. I did get a chest X-ray due to the developing the building up of chest pressure,
Because
as
did
well as
you
the
feel
dry
like you
cough.
couldn't breathe?
I not once did I feel like I was out of breath. However, I did have pain and discomfort, sharp pain upon breathing in. Right, I couldn't take a full breath. I could breathe,
Oh,
and I could breathe. I felt, relatively normally. But if I wanted to take a deep breath and hold that, I would cause a lot of pain and discomfort.
wow. So
And
I would imagine if you were not in the medical field, that would be very frightening. And I think that's probably
correct.
a lot of people end up going to the
Yeah.
hospital because they feel like they can't breathe.
Yeah. Yeah. And my poor dad, he, wishes to remain anonymous, but he actually ended up getting the virus as well, from myself, because I'm currently with him, while I'm going through my
I
rotations
was
here in
going to
South Florida.
ask you about,
Yeah.
so you were in a home with other people.
With just my father. Yeah. And,
Okay.
he unfortunately caught the worst of it. His virus, the virus, and the fever were a lot more severe. Temperature maxed out around 104, and his fever lasted about a week straight, close to a week straight.
Oh, fever
Fortunately,
for a full
yeah,
week. I can't
yeah.
imagine that.
But silver lining is that it is very responsive to Tylenol. So fortunately, we were able to control the symptoms and the temperature through giving him Tylenol. There were times where we were close to having to take him to the hospital,
Mhm.
and that got a little scary.
Well, I
But
guess he kind of had his
fortunately,
own
again,
medic there in you, but
yeah,
even if
yeah,
whatever you thought he was close to going to the hospital, can you imagine how someone with no medical training panics at home
yeah.
when this
Yeah,
happens?
I can completely understand that. Absolutely. And it is scary. I think that during this time, the biggest and most important thing is continue to stay informed, continue to monitor yourself and keep tabs, on how you're feeling internally, and keep in touch with your primary physician. But just from what I've heard and what physicians have told me, as long as you can control your fever, and as long as you don't develop shortness of breath, the shortness of breath, and feeling like you just can't catch your breath, you feel like you're breathing very rapidly, um, you know, that's if it gets to that point, God forbid, then yes, you should go to the emergency department. This is a respiratory disease, and it could, take a turn at any moment. So that's why it's important to continue to measure your breathing.
Right.
And again, if it gets worse, then it's good to go.
Okay. And so your father, your poor father, he suffered worse than you because was it age related, you think? The older someone is, the more serious it would be? I mean, you sound like you had a pretty bad, you're 29 years old.
Yeah.
But
No, I mean, I was surprised by it. So I believe, yeah, there's a variety of factors that probably play a role. He is going on 60 years old. So I'm sure that definitely played a huge role. I also think the viral load possibly played a role, because by the time he was exposed, I was in the thick. I'm
oh,
sorry.
I've heard that some people have a higher viral load, and that would be because they were exposed for a longer period of time by someone that's sick. Do you think that's what it is? Like you just had casual contact with someone.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess if someone were living in the home with you, they would have more of a viral load. Is that what you're saying?
So I guess it all depends on how long the virus is in your body and able to replicate. So if it's in your body and you have more severe symptoms, then that would lead me to believe that you have a larger viral load, meaning you have more virus in your body. And for example, I think in the case of my dad, because I was in the thick of it and experiencing those symptoms, that when he first got exposed to me, and then he got a larger dose of that virus, which is probably what led to his more severe clinical course.
That's very interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so a higher viral load you think causes worse symptoms. Let's go over all the symptoms again that you
Yes.
have, just in case someone's watching this or listening to this on the radio and thinking, do I maybe have this? Or what symptoms should I look out for? The very first
Okay.
thing is the fever. You
Very
didn't feel
first.
bad at all up until then? You felt fine?
Felt fine. Bizarre thing. I mean, it was the fever and it hit me like a tidal wave. I'm watching a movie 1 a.m. and within maybe 5 minutes, I'm just like, wow, I'm hot. Where did this come from? So it was the fever. And then the next morning I woke up. It was fatigue and headache all day. I didn't want to get up. I was tired. felt like, again, I'd been hit by a train. And that was through the first week. Fatigue, headache, fever came at night, back pain, muscle.
The fever only
That's
came.
a good question. I couldn't tell you. I really have no idea. That's one thing that continues to puzzle me about this virus, is why it is a nocturnal fever. Even for my dad as well. He did suffer from that fever nocturnally.
That's heard.
Yeah. And then 2 to 3 days, I developed the muscle pain, and the muscle pain continued for about another week and a half. And
what did that feel like? Like, did it feel like it when you work out and you do a different kind of exercise, and then for a couple of days you have muscle pain? Is that kind of feeling?
That's a good question. I mean, I can't say I've ever sprained my back, so I don't know. It didn't feel like it was. If I could describe it, but again, I've never really strained my back. I want to say it felt like that. It just felt like the minute I laid on my bed, the minute I tried to lay on the couch, just discomfort. It was very bad discomfort, to the point that I couldn't sleep. I wouldn't be able to sleep. Yeah. So it definitely felt like I pulled something. And it actually migrated. It started in my lower back and made its way to my upper back. I did have some neck pain as well. So that to me was probably one of the frustrating parts of it, because, it prevented me from sleeping and resting. And that's perhaps one of the biggest tools you can to defeating this thing, is just resting.
Okay. So you had the fatigue, you had the fever. Was there any gastrointestinal component at all, or was it more like a cold?
Oh, in my mind, there were two phases of this.
Anything in your sinuses, anything like that?
No, luckily no sinus issues, no sore throat, no nasal congestion, no runny nose. There were two phases of this for me. The first phase was the fever, as I mentioned before, the fatigue, the headache. The second phase, still fatigue, still muscle pain, but that's when I actually started developing the respiratory. That was week 2. I developed the respiratory, the chest pressure, felt like someone was sitting on my chest, as well as the inspiratory pain, and actually some GI and bowel discomfort. That was very minimal. Mm-hmm.
So the chest pressure felt like someone was sitting on your chest, you said?
Yeah, correct.
That's very scary.
Yeah, it was mild. It was, mild / moderate. It did get to the point where I felt it was necessary for my father and I to go get a chest X-ray, to just so we can track this thing, because, that to me is probably the, one of the scarier symptoms, because breathing is everything. So yeah, so that prompted us to get a chest X-ray, and it progressed slowly. And then finally, maybe as of this week, it's starting to disappear. I still have a dry cough.
It was about 2 weeks duration then of symptoms? That's a long time.
It is.
Wow.
And yeah, that's what surprised me the most. Is because I expected maybe a week tops, right? And this virus just dragged, was very persistent, very stubborn, and just unrelenting.
Was there a break in the middle? Some people say they suffered for about a week and then it seemed to go away and came back. Did you have that?
When slightly, I would say maybe for about a day or two, when, my fever kind of subsided a little bit. But that I had maybe a day or two, I'm like, oh, I feel okay, just tired. And then that's when I started developing some of the respiratory symptoms. But I think one thing I've learned is that some of these the cases do vary, and sometimes no rhyme or reason to what symptom comes first and what the course is like. But there does seem to be a consistency, at least in the nature of the symptoms.
And I think you said that you lost your sense of smell and taste?
I did.
Does that happen to everyone? Because I've heard a lot of reports have said that.
Great question. My father never complained of loss of smell. We did have a decreased appetite. In fact, I'm probably down maybe 10 pounds from where I was 2 weeks ago. The smell actually came on. The loss of smell, I would say, came on maybe last week. It's gotten better now, and it only lasted maybe 2-3 days 3 days tops. But I was actually in the shower and, and using my normal body soap. And I was like, wow, this doesn't smell like how it normally smells. I don't recognize the smell. What is this? So that's when it dawned on me. Like, oh, this is what's going on. This is bizarre.
Yeah, I've heard of people that were cooking. They weren't even sick, and they couldn't smell the garlic or the onions, and so they knew something was wrong. That's a bizarre thing to have happen.
Can't explain it at all.
Well, your advice to people then is to do everything they can to not get this. I mean, some people probably feel like they just want to get it over with, but it's no walk in the park, right?
Absolutely not. I wouldn't wish it upon anybody. Am I happy? I'm past it. Absolutely. Yeah. But, I would not ever want to go through this again. And I think the biggest thing is seeing what my dad went through and seeing the potential and, how devastating this thing can be and how tough it can be and relentless. It really, really heightened my level of concern for people and, for people's parents, for grandparents. This thing is, it's really no joke.
Right, your father's was just all that old. What if someone were in their 80s and got this?
Correct. And my mother has had, she has a history of respiratory issues, bronchitis, and it scares the living daylight out of me, the thought of her potentially having to battle this. My dad's a healthy guy. Again, no past medical history, so it scares me to think the potential that this could have, the devastating potential could have on people's loved ones, on people's families. And in fact, today I just learned about one of my buddies, his grandfather just passed away because of it. And, I hope it stops, and I hope this dust settles very soon, sooner than later. I also want to make a note, in case just so I don't forget, my uncle did prescribe my father he was 4 days into his fever, Z-Pak as well as hydroxychloroquine, and 2 days later his fever broke. So maybe there's something to be said about the benefits of that, but also even maybe the natural progression. But I do also want to make a mention of that it actually could have benefited.
They are prescribing that to people that have COVID-19. So hopefully that will be something promising. What do you think about vaccine? How far off do you think that would be?
Hope soon. Ebola, one of our earlier pandemics actually broke records by, I think, developing a vaccine within, 3 years. But so that broke records. So I hope with the global effort, the amount of money, the amount of education, research efforts that are being put into this, I can only hope that we're a couple months away. I have every intention of, once I clear this thing, to go donating my plasma to help lead that effort and seeing what I could do on the front line, just so we can help streamline those efforts.
Okay, so you definitely recommend the social distancing, staying home. Yeah. If you had stayed home and not gotten together with your buddy that night, you wouldn't have contracted it, if you think that's where you got it. So people shouldn't be out socializing. Those efforts would definitely work to stay at home. I actually had seen him because I was in school and had seen him through some of my rotations. So could have happened at any point. But stay home as much as possible. If you don't feel the need to go out, then don't. If you do, wear gloves, wear a mask, and even when you're out there, just don't go senselessly touching anything and just assume. For example, I've seen people gloves, right? Just because you have the gloves doesn't mean you're protected. Like, put on the gloves, go touching things around the store, then start touching their phone, get into their car, touch the wheel. Like that, it's self-defeating at that point. So you have to assume within any use, within that environment, they're automatically infected. Because of that, carry sanitizer and make sure that you're also disinfecting even some of those groceries that you bring home. Just open your packages outside with gloves. Leave the boxes outside because there have been cases reported in warehouses here in South Florida. So, that's another thing to keep in mind. So do you feel that you got it? Do you think you got it from respiratory droplets, or do you think you got it from touching something and then touching your face?
looking back, it's hard to say. At no point do I recall him sneezing or coughing or anything. But it probably could have even been both. Considering that my course was worse than him, I probably could have been exposed to maybe a little bit higher load. So I don't know.
That's so interesting that you're talking about the amount of load exposure maybe correlating to the severity of the illness.
Yeah. My dad contracted it through surface, because I was in my room all day. I made sure to not cough, sneeze, breathe around him, whatever. And but however, even while I was moving through the house, I would try to use gloves and stuff, or use something, and one way or another, he got it. So it
So you were
leads me to believe it
making an
was
effort
definitely
to- Yeah.
yeah. So I try to be mindful, but again, because of our close vicinity and being in the same house, it was almost inevitable at that point.
So what's the time period from exposure to symptoms, do you think, in your experience and in your father's experience?
3 days.
3 days.
In my experience, it's said, I've read online that it can take anywhere up to a week. However, it seemed that from my onset of symptoms was on the 23rd. His onset of symptoms were on the 26th. So it seemed that even when I last saw my friend, that was on the 20th. So it seemed like there was a 3-day period for all of us. And again, it came on.
26. That's interesting.
Right? Yeah.
Wow. Okay,
And it
so
came on like a tidal wave.
so the fever, was there nausea with it and all of that?
No nausea.
That's good.
No, yeah, thank God. There was a lot of too mentally. With being tired, it was a physical fatigue as well as a mental fatigue. I want to make that point to people that I just didn't have also the energy to want to think, or which is also why I decided to go public now that I'm close to 100% with all this, because going through all that, I didn't have, I wanted to focus on resting, and I wouldn't have had the energy
No
to
energy.
have gone through an interview or anything. Yeah.
Can't even talk. Wow. Oof. Okay, well, thank you very much. We're running out of time here. Thank you for talking to me. This will be very helpful to people. It'll make them take this disease seriously and make them understand how easily and quickly it spreads, and how important it is for people to wear gloves, mask, goggles when they have to go out and not touch anything. And I'm so glad that you're feeling better. You look great. How's your dad?
Thank you. He's doing well. Knock on wood. He's 3 days past his last fever. He seems to be on an upward trajectory. Thank God. He seems to be doing well. He seems close back to normal. And I'm very thankful for that. And Becky, thank you for having me. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today, allowing me to share this experience, allowing us to go through this interview, raise awareness. Again, load up on Tylenol for everyone at home watching.
So the
this. Load up on Tylenol.
Tylenol is the key to getting through it.
It was our saving grace. It really helped control the fever and bring it down anytime any of us were struggling
with it.
Did you feel
better when you took it?
Correct. Yeah, it did. In terms of the fever and stuff. So load up on that. Load up on Gatorade, multivitamins, those sort of things. Vitamin C.
Okay, so Tylenol, fluids.
Yeah.
Maybe some soup.
Yeah.
and you'll get through it. This has been very interesting. You're very enlightening. I learned a lot. So
good.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Feel better. Hope your dad feels better. And
I appreciate
thank you so
that.
much for talking to me.
Thank you for having me, Becky. Please stay safe. If you ever have any future questions, please do not hesitate to reach out.
Okay. In touch.
And then thank you for everything, and best of luck. And we'll defeat this. We'll get through this together.
Yeah, we will. Okay. Thank you, Ryan. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you. Take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You have been watching and listening to The Becky and Boca Show. Tune in every Thursday night to discover all the ways to spoil yourself and have a good time in beautiful Boca Raton. See you next week.